The great martyrdom of Imam Hussain, his family and his companions, may peace and blessings be upon all of them. And the topic of this series of majalis, of which this is the fourth, is Imam Hussain, a manifestation of the Holy Quran. We have the honor of having Sayyid Ali Aqib Jaffry, Hujjatul Islam, with us reciting these majalis. To start the fourth majlis, I will request Sayyid Hussain Jaffry to come and recite from the Holy Quran, followed by Sayyid Muhammad Jaffry, who will also recite from the Holy Quran. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا نحن نرث الأرض ومن عليها وإلينا يرجعون. واذكر في الكتاب إبراهيم إنه كان صديقا نبيا. إذ قال لأبيه يا أبت لم تعبد ما لا يسمع ولا يبصر ولا يغني عنك شيئا. يا أبت إني قد جاءني من العلم ما لم يأتك فاتبعني أهدك صراطا سويا. يا أبت لا تعبد الشيطان. يا أبت لا تعبد الشيطان إن الشيطان كان للرحمن عصيا. يا أبت إني أخاف أن يمسك عذاب من الرحمن فتكون للشيطان وليا. قال أراغب أنت عن آلهتي يا إبراهيم. قال أراغب أنت عن آلهتي يا إبراهيم لئن لم تنته لأرجمنك لئن لم تنته لأرجمنك واهجرني مليا. قال سلام. قال سلام عليك سأستغفر لك ربي إنه كان بي حفيا. وأعتزلكم وما تدعون من دون الله وأدعو ربي عسى ألا أكون بدعاء ربي شقيا. فلما اعتزلهم وما يعبدون من دون الله وهبنا له إسحاق ويعقوب وكلا جعلنا نبيا. ووهبنا لهم من رحمتنا وجعلنا لهم لسان صدق عليا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Beneficent. Indeed, we shall inherit the earth and whoever there is on it, and to us they shall be brought back. And mention in the book Abraham, indeed he was a truthful man and a prophet. When he said to his father, Father, why do you worship that which neither hears nor sees, and is of no avail to you in any way? Father, indeed a knowledge has already come to me, which has not come to you, so follow me that I may guide you to a right path. Father, do not worship Satan. Indeed, Satan is disobedient to the All-Beneficent. Father, I am indeed afraid that a punishment from the All-Beneficent will befall you, and you will become Satan's accomplice. He said, Ibrahim, are you renouncing my gods? If you do not desist, I will stone you. Get away from me for a long while. He said, peace be to you, I shall plead with my Lord to forgive you. Indeed, he is gracious to me. I disassociate myself from you, and whatever you invoke beside Allah, I will supplicate my Lord. Hopefully, I will not be disappointed in supplicating my Lord. So when he had left them, and what they worshipped besides Allah, we gave him Ishaq and Yaqub, and each we made a prophet. And we gave them out of our mercy, and conferred on them a worthy and lofty repute. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, a couple of announcements. The first is that there will be a question and answer session just after Maulana finishes his speech. After the Nauha or Matam and before the Ziyarat, there will be a question and answer session for about 10 minutes. We hope to complete the program by 7 p.m. sharp. In order to post your questions, you can go to slido.com, slido.com, and enter the code Muharram-1444, Muharram 2022, and then you can post your question either with your name or anonymously there, and Maulana inshallah will try to answer it after the Nauha and before the Ziyarat. The second thing is, if anybody wants to come and recite here as part of these majalis or give a speech, please do let me know. You can contact me after the majlis. That would be the most convenient way to do it, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today's Tabarruk is sponsored by Sayyid Wasim Ali and his family. Let us remember their marhumeen and marhumat with the Surah Al-Fatiha, especially Sayyid Shafqat Ali and Sayyida Firasat Jabeen marhuma. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. لك ولبيك يا حسين، لك ولبيك يا حسين. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. لك ولبيك يا حسين، لك ولبيك يا حسين. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. When Yazidi slings and arrows murdered Abbas Dilavar, when Yazidi slings and arrows murdered Abbas Dilavar, Ashqiya taunted Mawla, Ashqiya taunted Mawla. You have no one, Ibn Zahra. Laka wa labbaik ya Husayna, لك ولبيك يا حسين. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. When Shabih Mustafa fell, Mawla said this in his farewell. When Shabih Mustafa fell, Mawla said this in his farewell. How will I carry you, Akbar? How will I carry you, Akbar? How will I face Layla? Laka wa labbaik ya Husaina. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. Holding a sugar, said a Mawla, Inna lillah bat ilahi. Holding a sugar, said a Mawla, Inna lillah bat ilahi. Tell me how to bury a sugar. Tell me how to bury a sugar, how to comfort his sakina. Laka wa labbaik ya Husaina. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. رضا بقضاء وتسليما لأمر مولى whispered. رضا بقضاء وتسليما لأمر مولى whispered. Heaven is still reverberating. Heaven is still reverberating from that whisper, from the sajda. Laka wa labbaik ya Husaina. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. Why are you hiding, O Baba, from Sakina Aina Bata? Why are you hiding, O Baba, from Sakina Aina Bata? Come to me, come to the maqtal. Come to me, come to the maqtal. تعال إلي يا بني. لك ولبيك يا حسينا. لك ولبيك يا حسين. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. يوم عاشورا we killed every Hussaini. Ashkiya said, يوم عاشورا we killed every Hussaini. Ashkiya said, Lady Zainab said Hussaini. Lady Zainab said Hussaini. Shia will live till Qiyamah. Laka wa labbaik ya Husaina. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. When the zalim Zalim try to suppress voices of freedom and justice. When the Zalim
try to suppress voices of freedom and justice,
we will stand up for the Madhloom. We will stand up for the Madhloom, as Hussainis with the Noha. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussaina, laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. Everyone, one more time. Laka wa labbaik ya Hussaina, laka wa labbaik ya Hussain. For you and with you, O Mawla, for you and with you, Hussain. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, I will now request Hujjatul Islam, Moulana Syed Ali Aqib Jaffry, to come and recite the fourth of the series of 9 majalis on the topic of Imam Hussain, alayhi salam, a manifestation of the Holy Quran. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب قلوبنا وبالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الغر الميامين المعصومين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وخطابه المتين، وهو أصدق القائلين وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم. صلوات The Holy Quran is a miracle of the Holy Prophet, a book of guidance, and it guides towards that which is most upright. Inna hadha al-Quran yahdi lillati hiya aqwam. And according to some traditions, one of the Masadiq, the most evident, the most important mistaq of lillati hiya aqwam are the Imams themselves. The Quran holds all the pointers to guidance. It guides and it points to individuals that you are in need of to understand the Quran even better and deeper. The Quran points towards the Ahlul Bayt. The Quran points towards those whose obedience have been made obligatory on you. The Quran points towards those who are a manifestation of the Holy Quran, who hold the realities of the Holy Quran within themselves. The Quran informs us of our purpose of creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us for no reason. There was a purpose behind our creation, and that purpose has been disclosed in the Holy Quran in this verse, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We did not create the jinn and the ins except for our worship. In other words, to be more precise, the only reason why we created jinn and ins, humans and jinns, were created only and only for worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the only reason that they were created for. But then we don't find ourselves engaged only and solely in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Quran is saying your purpose of creation is that you should worship, you should only worship Allah and do nothing else. That is the only purpose of your creation, to worship Allah. How many of us have fulfilled that purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We look at the lives of the Imams and the Prophets. We don't find themselves engaged in these rituals alone. They used to make a living. They interacted with their friends, with their companions, with their family members. They slept, they ate, they drank. The verse is saying the only reason why you have been created is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything other than worship of Allah would mean a deviation from your purpose of creation. So how do we reconcile this issue? If our purpose is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't see ourselves and we don't see the Imams limiting themselves to the rituals. The answer lies in the statement of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam when he addresses his companions, saying, Inna Allah azza wa jal ma khalaqal ibad illa liya'rifuhu. Allah did not create his servants but for the reason that they should know him, they should have his ma'rifah. The Quran is saying purpose of creation is ibadat. Imam is saying the purpose of creation is ma'rifah. There shouldn't be any contradiction between the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. So how do you relate ma'rifat with ibadat? The answer comes in the very next statement from the Imam. He says, فَإِذَا عَرَفُوهُ عَبَدُوهُ. When they will have the ma'rifat of Allah, they will worship him. They will worship him automatically. Ma'rifat is a prerequisite to worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ma'rifat muqaddama hai ibadat ka. If we want our children to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the key lies in this statement of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. If we are able to give them the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will automatically worship Allah. Automatically. And then the very next statement, does this worship of Allah benefit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any way? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in need of our worship? Yes or no? Obviously, no, Allah is not in need of our worship, but then He still has commanded us to worship Him. For those of my younger brothers who are here, it's just like if the sun was to command the plant to come in its sunlight. If the sun was to say to the plants and the trees and the plantation, you need to come in my sunlight every day, and the plants turn back to the sun and says, well, whether I benefit from your sunlight or not, you're not going to benefit from me. The sun has no benefit whether the plants come under the sunlight or they stay in the shade. Who will benefit? The plants themselves will benefit. Similarly, if we fulfill our purpose of creation, which is ibadat, it is us who will benefit. And the Imam in the very next statement says, فَإِذَا عَبَدُوهُ, if they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِسْتَغْنَوْا بِعِبَادَتِهِ عَنْ إِبَادَتِ مَا سِوَاهُ, they will become free through the worship of Allah. They will become free of worshipping other than Allah. True freedom lies in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True freedom lies in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our purpose of creation. And through ibadat, through obedience to Allah, and the essence of ibadat, I don't want to get into this topic because we will then be deviated from our original topic. The essence of ibadat, the essence of worship is obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Hazrat Adam was created and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the malaika to prostrate before Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, Shaitan did not bow. And at that point, the Quran mentions the dialogue. In the traditions we have that Shaitan, Iblis proposed, give a suggestion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, "Oh Allah, forgive me this one sajda to Adam. Excuse me from prostrating to Adam, and in return, what will I do? Inni a'buduka ibadatan lam ya'budkaha nabiyyun mursal wala malakun muqarrab." Excuse me this worship, this prostration to Adam, and instead I will perform an ibadat that no Nabi has done and no Malak, no angel has ever performed before. So he did not refuse to worship Allah. He said, forgive me this obedience of yours, this one command. Excuse me from this command. And what was the reply? Allah replied, La hajata li ila ibadatik. I don't need your worship. Inni uridu an ubad min haysu urid, la min haysu turid. I want to be worshipped the way I like, not the way you want. Ibadat wo jo khuda chahe. His obedience is worship. So if we were to live our lives in obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if our eating is in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if our sleeping is in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if our walking, if our studying, if our listening to our parents is in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then our entire life will be an act of worship. Our entire life will be an act of worship. The verse that says, Inni salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin will become a mistaq of that verse of the Holy Quran, where your rituals, your walking, your talking, your drinking, your eating, your sleeping, your life and death will become a worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the purpose of our creation. And that is what the Holy Prophet came to teach us. Because obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot happen if we do not know the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the commands of Allah has to come through the Prophet of Allah, through his messenger. And they need to be enacted, and they need to be performed, and they need to be displayed before us so that we know how to exercise them in our daily life. This was the divine mission of prophethood. And after the mission of prophethood starts the mission of imamat, which is an extension of the mission of the institution of prophethood. A lot of the responsibilities of the prophet are passed down to the Imams. Obviously, the divine revelation stops with the Holy Prophet. There will be no more divine revelation after the Holy Prophet. But some of the responsibilities of the prophets passes down to the Imam. And through worship and through obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we achieve our own perfection. On the first day we mentioned it, we are all in need of guidance, and the plants, they reach their perfection through the genetic coding that Allah has guided them in their genetic structure, and we humans need guidance in the spiritual domain, specifically. Reach our bodily features, grow and get to their perfection, but we also need perfection in our spiritual domain. And that is where this guidance from Allah comes. And Allah, in order to enable us and in order to motivate us towards our journey to perfection, He instilled in us the love of perfection. We all love perfection. How many of you here sitting would want to be imperfect? None. We love perfection. That is why when your dress becomes dirty, you wash it. Because you consider impurity or dirt a sign of imperfection. If somebody is handicapped, he would like to get rid of that handicap because he considers that an imperfection. And if he cannot get rid of that, he will hide it. This hiding again shows that you do not want your imperfections to be shown. So if you can get rid of them, you will do that. And if you cannot, you will hide them. The same goes with spiritual perfections. If a person is a miser, he would not like to be called a miser. So if he can get rid of that spiritual defect, he will. And if he can't, he will resort to riya and showing off. He will give and donate in public so that he's not termed and called a miser. So that is where riya sprouts from. It is actually the love of perfection that is driving our lives. And sometimes we make a mistake in identifying where true perfection lies. Some of us think the true perfection lies in gathering more wealth, and then we start running after wealth and start collecting as much wealth as we can. Some people think that power is perfection. They start running after more and more power. Some people think fame is perfection, and they start running after fame and becoming as famous as they can. But if these things were true perfection, if these were the masadiq and instances of perfection, the more wealth you have, the more satisfied you should be. The more fame you get, the more satisfied you should be, because you're getting closer to your perfection, to your purpose of creation. The more power you get, the more satisfied you should be. But we don't see that. The more wealth you have, the more greedy you become. The more power you have. If man gets control over one continent, he wants to get control over and the next one. And that is why you see all these wars happening. The more famous you become, the more hollow and empty you feel. So these are signs that fame, power, wealth, after which the world is running, are not true instances of perfection. Again, the Quran comes to our rescue here with this beautiful verse of the Holy Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Be aware that the tranquility of the hearts lie in the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The tranquility of the hearts lie in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want, and that is where true perfection lies. And the closer you become to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more zikr of Allah you do, the more peaceful you become. The more tranquility your entire being will get. And we see that in our daily lives. And the Holy Quran, another verse which I recited 2 days ago, says, وَمَنْ مَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, what will happen? إِنَّ لَهُ ma'ishatan zanka. He will have a tight livelihood. وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى. And we will raise him on the day of judgment A'ma, as a blind person. Whoever turns away from my dhikr, this is what is going to happen. In another verse of the Holy Quran, فَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي, establish prayers for my remembrance. You connect all of that. Whoever leaves salat, what is going to happen in his life? The equations and the formulas are all there in the Quran. So it is this love of perfection that we all have within ourselves is actually nothing else but the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. Because He is the absolute perfection that exists, and it is His love that He has instilled in our hearts which is driving us in our lives towards Him. When we say we love perfection, it is actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we love, and it is Him that we all want. We are moving towards Him. We strive and we want to move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we cannot see Him. We cannot see the manifestations of His divine attributes in Him physically, because He cannot manifest Himself physically. So the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are presented to us through our Imams. They are the divine manifestations of the realities of the Quran. They are the divine manifestations of the mercy of Allah, of the ghazab of Allah, of the power of Allah, of the wisdom of Allah, of the knowledge of Allah. Any attribute of Allah that you want to see, you can look, you can find them in the Ahlul Bayt. They are the true manifestations of the realities of the Quran. To give an example, Quran referring to the muttaqeen, the Quran mentions their attributes, saying, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, they suppress their ghayz, their anger. Anger would be a loose translation. وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ, and they forgive people. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the good doers. This is the verse of the Holy Quran. If you want to see the manifestation of them in our Ahlul Bayt, there's a story, again, we find the story for many Imams, but specifically one related to Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. Please recite a salawat. Because these days pertain to Imam Hussain, so I wanted to recite, him manifesting this verse of the Holy Quran. The tradition says that one of his slaves committed a certain act which was inappropriate, and he deserved to be punished. He deserved to be corrected. So the Imam instructed so. This slave of the Imam recited this verse of the Holy Quran, وَالْكَاذِبِينَ الْغَيْظِ, referring to the attributes of the muttaqeen, that they suppress their anger. While listening to this verse, the Imam says, let him go. Let him go. Do not execute the punishment on him. Then he recited the next verse, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Suppressing the anger is one thing, and forgiving is something else. So very next verse he recited, وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. Muttaqeen are those who forgive people. The Imam said, I have forgiven you the act that you performed. He was forgiven. He did not stop there. He said, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and Allah loves the good doers. And Imam said, I free you from your slavery. You are a free man. And what I have given you before, I will provide you twice as much. Wallahu yuhibbul muhsinin. A manifestation of this verse of the Holy Quran. Not only we find this incident for Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, we find that for Imam Kazim alayhi salam, and other Imams as well. It's abundant. Find many stories where a person from Sham comes and he says bad words to the Imam, and he forgives them, and he recites the verses of the Holy Quran, and he forgives them and actually offers his help. And when that person who has come from Sham and was under the propaganda of the government of Sham, when he was leaving Medina, he leaves with this statement. He says that when I entered Medina, Ali and his sons were the most hated people for me on the face of earth. And now that I am leaving Medina, they are the one I love the most. They are They are the ones I love the most. This is what manifesting Quran and acting on Quran does to others. The Imam has a beautiful statement. He says, "An-nas law alimu mahasina kalamina lattaba'una." If people knew the beauty of our words, they would follow us. They would come to us. They would be attracted to us. The only thing we need to do is to present the beauty of the words of the Imam to people. That is all. Because they are the manifestations of the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the manifestation of the kalimatullah, of the kalamullah. One of the most important responsibilities and Quranic principles that is an obligation for all of us, and a very serious obligation for the Imams and the Holy Prophet, is that of Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. This section is going to be a little tough, I might say. Not tough, but because people are not used to listening these words, and there might be a little bit of a muqaddama, prerequisite that might be needed to understand this discussion, so please bear with me. And at the end you will be surprised why we were so ignorant or not exposed to such an important principle of the Holy Quran. A lot of things that we have within ourselves, like the love for perfection, the desire to get more good, they're all fitri, they are part of our nature. Another important thing that is part of our nature is that we want to protect ourselves from dangers, and we want to acquire goodness. Whatever is beneficial, we want to acquire that, and we want to get rid of what is dangerous to us and our children. So this is something that is fitri, that is part of our nature. Not only us. You look at parents, they don't want their kids to play with knife. Why? Because they are afraid they might hurt themselves. You don't want your children to play with fire. Why? Because they might hurt themselves. Not only this, not only humans, even the animals warn each other of the dangers that they might face. Even the animals, in the Holy Quran refers to that in the story of Prophet Sulaiman when he and his forces entered the valley. The Holy Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, hatta iza ataw ala wadin namal." When they reached the valley of the ants, where the ants lived, qalat namlatun, the ants said to the other ants, "Ya ayyuhan naml, O ants, udkhulu masakinakum, enter your houses, get into your houses. La yahtimannakum Sulaiman wa junuduhu." So that you are not stampeded by Sulaiman and his soldiers, alayhi salatu wassalam. Wahum la yash'urun, while they do not know. They unknowingly stampede on you, unknowingly crush you, enter into your houses. This ant is warning its fellow beings of an imminent danger, and that too, and the verse says that Hazrat Sulaiman smiled at what the ant said, and there are many reasons for why he smiled. But one important thing, the ants also realized, wahum la yash'urun, if the soldiers were to crush them, it would be because they would not know what they were doing. It would not be because they wanted to crush them. So maybe that is also probably one of the reasons why he smiled, that the ants have this level of ma'rifah as well. They understand that even the Prophet and the soldiers who are with the Prophet would not do these things as a sin. It might be unconscious. So it is natural for us to warn others and stop our children from doing something that is harmful to them, that is dangerous to them. It is something very fitri. And based on this fitri command is the principle of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. What does Amr mean? Amr means to command. Ma'ruf. Ma'ruf is translated as achai, goodness, good. Nahi means to stop, to forbid, rokna. And munkar means bad, evil. This is how we translate. But if you look at the literal meaning of ma'ruf and in munkar, it becomes even more beautiful. In Urdu, you must have heard the word ma'rifa and nakra. Right? Isme ma'rifa and ek pe nakra, you translate it as a proper noun and common noun. Why is ma'rifa called ma'rifa? Because it is well defined, it is known, you know it. Something that you know is called ma'rifa, and nakra is someone that is not known. For a boy, a girl, you don't know the specifics, you don't know the detail. It's a boy, right? It's not a specific boy, it's a boy. It's kind of unknown. So ma'ruf is something that our fitrat is in align with, our fitrat knows it. And nakra is something that is alien to our fitrah. Sin is alien to our fitrah. And goodness is something that our fitrat recognizes and acknowledges. So this principle, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, which is translated as to command towards goodness and to forbid from evil, or forbid from something that is bad, is a Quranic principle and is the responsibility of all of us at one level or the other, and a very important and probably the most important responsibility of all the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Holy Quran refers to the purpose behind sending the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it says, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. Verily we sent prophets in every nation. Why? أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ. The people should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ, and stay away from the taghut. These two commands were one of the most fundamental commands that every prophet had to perform. Commanding people towards worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the biggest ma'ruf possible. And asking them to stay, forbidding them not to side with the taghut, with the tyrants, which is the biggest munkar possible. The Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar in this highest form was the responsibility of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you towards ma'ruf. Inna Allah ya'muru kum bil adli wal ihsan. And what does shaitan do? Ya'murukum bil fahsha. He commands you towards fahsha, towards immorality. That is what shaitan does. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the prophets want us to move in the direction towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not in the direction towards shaitan. So this divine responsibility of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar is the responsibility of all of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even the kalima La ilaha illallah, there's a tradition which says that the kalima of Allah, La ilaha illallah, will guide you, will protect you as long as iski tahqeer na ki jaye. It is not considered insignificant. Its sanctity is not violated. It will protect you, it will guide you, it will be a source of your salvation if its sanctity is not violated. The Imam was asked, how would its sanctity be violated? When you say La ilaha illallah, how would its sanctity be violated? The Imam replied, if a sin is performed openly and you do not react to it, you do not stop it, Kalimatul La ilaha illallah, its sanctity is violated. When La ilaha illallah, if its sanctity is violated and we do not react, then this kalima will not benefit us. And if the sanctity of La ilaha illallah is violated before the Imam, what responsibility would the Imam have? What responsibility would the Prophet of Allah have? Such an important responsibility that if it is ignored, if it is left unimplemented, nothing will stand on itself. The entire structure of religion will fall apart. The tradition says, وَمَا أَعْمَالُ الْبِرِّ كُلُّهَا. All of the good deeds, all of them, وَالْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and jihad in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّ الْأَمْرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيِ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ إِلَّا كَنَفْسَةٍ فِي بَحْرٍ لُجِّي. All of the good deeds, including jihad fi sabilillah, as compared to Amr bil Maruf, is like a drop of water as compared to an ocean. All of the good deeds. Why? Because it is through this biha tuqamul faraiz. It is through Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar that all the other faraiz will stay intact. This is the importance of Amr bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar. The society cannot stand if a person does not have taqwa. If a person does not have taqwa, what will happen to that person? What is taqwa? Taqwa is that force within yourself that protects you, that defends you against sin. So if a person does not have taqwa, there is no immune system. Taqwa is your immune system that protects your spirituality from intruders. So imagine a person who loses his immune system, what will happen to his body? All the disease will attack and he will die. So if a person loses his taqwa, he will become the center of all the vices. So the same role that taqwa plays for a human being, Amr bil Maruf Nahi Anil Munkar plays for a society. If a society stops Amr bil Maruf and Nahi Anil Munkar, it means that that society does not have any defense mechanism left. No defense mechanism. Because nobody is stopping towards, nobody is inviting you towards good and nobody is stopping from evil. So if an evil begins to sprout, it will become stronger and stronger with every passing day. So gradually, goodness will erode and evil will take root. And this is what the tradition of the Holy Prophet, he turns to his companions and said, the Holy Prophet, كَيْفَ بِكُمْ إِذَا فَسَدَتْ نِسَاؤُكُمْ وَفَسَقَ شَبَابُكُمْ. What will happen when the women will become corrupt and the youth will become disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَلَمْ تَعْمَرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَمْ تَنْهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And you would not be doing Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. What will happen to you? At that time when the women will become corrupt and the men would become fasiq. And you would have left the duty of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. فَقِيلَ لَهُ وَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. O Prophet of Allah, is that going to happen? in this ummah? He said, Na'am wa sharrum min dhalik. Yes. Rather, it's going to be worse than that. It's going to be worse than that. Kayfa bikum iza amartum bil munkar wa nahaytum anil ma'ruf. What will happen when you will start commanding towards evil and stopping from good? So if a society leaves the obligation of Amr bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar, eventually they reach a level of deterioration. The society deteriorates to a level where people start commanding towards evil and stopping from good. If a person wants to be honest and make an honest livelihood in a government department, what are others going to say to him right now? You can't survive. You can't succeed. You have to be corrupt. You have to do this. You have to do that. They will show him all the ways, all the evil ways. So if Amr al-Ma'ruf is stopped, the situation of the society deteriorates to a level where people starts commanding towards evil and stopping from the good. The companions were surprised. And this holds for in our households as well. In our households as well, if we don't implement Amr bil Ma'ruf in our children, in ourselves, in our families. فَقِيلَ لَهُ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Is that going to happen? The Holy Prophet said, yes. Worse than that is going to happen. And we see that happening in our communities. Worse than that is going to happen. And what is that? كَيْفَ بِكُمْ إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْمَعْرُوفِ مُنْكَرًا وَالْمُنْكَرْ مَعْرُوفٌ. What will happen when you will consider ma'ruf to be munkar and munkar to be ma'ruf? The society will deteriorate and reach a level where the good will transform into evil and the evil will transform into good. The values will change. Achai burai ban jayegi, burai achai ban jayegi. And we see that happening in the West. If you compare the West with Islamic standards, a lot of evils that were considered evils 50 years ago are now considered virtues today. And a lot of things that were considered virtues are considered evil today. If you were to object to a certain mode of behavior in those days, you would be considered right and virtuous. But today, if you object to a certain mode of behavior, you will be taken to the psychiatrist and to the doctor for treatment. That is where that society has deteriorated. And if we leave this Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar, we will deteriorate to the same level. تُقَامُ بِهَا الْفَرَائِض. It is through Amr bil Ma'ruf that all the faraiz are established. And it's an obligation on all of us. What kind of an obligation and how, inshallah, we'll get into detail. And then there are prerequisites for that. In the coming days, inshallah, we'll talk about it a bit more. It's an important topic. It's a big topic. We can't finish it in one session. But remember, there are conditions before you start doing Amr bil Ma'ruf. And there are ways of doing Amr bil Ma'ruf. When you are dealing with an ignorant person, you don't start with Amr bil Ma'ruf. The responsibility that we all have towards an ignorant person is to teach them. So when you deal with an ignorant person, the responsibility is to teach them, ta'aleem. When you're dealing with a ghafil person, which most of us fall in that category, the responsibility is tazakkur, to remind them. It is with the alim that the severe dimensions of Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahy anil Munkar kicks in. There you are strict with an alim, a person who knows and he breaks the law. A person who doesn't know what the law is, you teach them. You don't punish them. And we see that again embodied in the grandsons of the Holy Prophet when they saw an old man who did not know how to do wuzu properly. And he was doing wuzu in the wrong manner. And Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam saw them. Recite salawat for both of them. They saw this old man who did not know how to do wuzu. So how should they now approach this old man? And if they were to go to them and say, An old man, you don't know how to do wudu. Is this the way to do wudu? You're so old. That would have pushed him away. He might become more stubborn in what he was doing. So they decided and came up with the plan. They started to present an argument among themselves. My wuzu is better than your, oh brother. He said, no, my wuzu is better than yours. And they started an argument, and then they said, well, let us go to this old man and ask him to be a judge between us. Let him be a judge between us. So they went to him and he said, old man, can you be the judge and look at our wuzu and tell us whose wuzu is complete and better? So one by one they performed the wuzu, and when he looked at his wuzu, at their wuzu, he immediately realized his own mistakes. And he said, your wuzu is complete. It was my wuzu that was incomplete. It was my wuzu that was incomplete. So when you're teaching, when you're doing Amr al-Maruf, or if you want to do Amr al-Maruf, you also need to look at the result and how your Amr al-Maruf will eventually unfold. So this is Amr al-Maruf, the prerequisite. Before you do Amr al-Maruf, you have to do ta'aleem, you have to educate. And Imam Hussain, through this methodology, they educated this old man. Another example, and inshallah then we'll move on to the Masahib, and apologies for taking a few extra minutes. In case of a ghafil person, if a person is ghafil, which most of us are, for example, sometimes you're driving and you don't realize that you just crossed a red light. That's when you're ghafil. You know the law, but then you weren't paying attention. That's when you're in a state of ghaflat, which most of us, the mutadayyineen, have. And that ghaflat needs to be removed. That is removed through tazakkur, through reminders. You must have heard the story of Bishr Hafi. There was a person who was disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In his house, you would hear music and alcohol, sounds of alcohol and music, sounds of music coming from his house. One day, Imam Kazim alayhi salatu was salam was passing by his house, and one of his maids had come out to throw the garbage or put the garbage out of the house. So the Imam turned to her and said, "Does the owner of this house, is he a slave or is he a free man? Azad hai ya ghulam hai?" She says, "Obviously he's a free man." The Imam said, "Yes, you're right. Had he been a slave, he wouldn't be doing this. Agar ghulam hota, agar abd hota, to ye na kar raha hota." She didn't understand. She came back in. Her master asked, "Why did it take you so long?" There was this man who was passing by, and he stopped me and he asked me this question. "What did he ask you?" He asked me if the owner of this house was a slave or a free man. And I said, "He's a free man." And what did he say? He said, if he was a slave, he wouldn't be doing this. You're right, he's a free man. He immediately realized that the person who passed by was not an ordinary person. Barefooted, he ran towards that person and met the Imam, and he said, "Oh Imam, you are right. I am a slave. I ought to be a slave. I am not a free person. Only a person who considers himself free from Allah would resort to all of this." At that point, he did his tawbah. So here, Imam, and because he met the Imam when he did the tawbah, he was barefooted. It is said that he remained barefooted through his entire life, to recall that moment where he had turned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what the word Hafi means. He was known as Bishr Hafi. Bishr was his name, and Hafi was a state of barefootedness. So this is how you guide a person who is in the state of ghafla. But then a person who is alim, who knows what is right and what is wrong, then a severe approach, a more stricter approach needs to be taken. And Imam Hussain had seen how the society has deteriorated. He was in a situation where he was seeing, and he had mentioned this many times, not only once, "Ala tarawna anna al-haq la yu'mal bihi." Are you not seeing addressing to the companions of Hur, that haqq is not being acted upon, وَأَنَّ الْبَاطِلَ لَا يُتَنَاهَا عَنْ, and nobody is stopping from batil. Haqq is being trampled and batil is rising. لِيَرْقَبِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فِي اللَّهِ فِي لِقَاءِ اللَّهِ مُحِقًّا. In such a situation, a mu'min should deserve to meet his Lord. When he was leaving Karbala, he was leaving Medina, the mission statement, the reason for his khuruj, إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي أريد أن آمر بالمعروف أنهى عن المنكر. I want to do amr bil maruf wa nahi anil munkar. Because this is the greatest and most important responsibility of the trustees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amr bil maruf wa nahi anil munkar. As I mentioned, the riwayat says that if La ilaha illallah, if its sanctity is violated and you do not react to it, then La ilaha illallah will not benefit you. And when the Imam was asked, how is the sanctity of La ilaha illallah violated? He says, if a sin is performed before you and you do not react to it, you have violated the sanctity of La ilaha illallah. All these sins, and the greatest sin is a person of like Yazid sitting on the mimbar of the Holy Prophet. How could Imam Hussain be silent? How could he not react? It was his responsibility, the foremost and the most important, his responsibility to react, and others to follow if they wanted to benefit from La ilaha illallah. And he being the divine representative of Allah, it was his task no matter what the outcome would be. And he had to act in a way that the true face of Bani Umayyah was exposed. That was also important, because the results are also important. And that is why he took his entire family with him. It was important that he take his entire family, including Ali Asghar and the women and the other children. For if they were not with him, imagine what would have happened. After the war, Imam Hussain alayhi salam would be remembered as a warrior, as a hero in the pages of history. And that would be it. The true face of Bani Umayyah would not be exposed. And even with him taking his family, we still hear arguments like Imam Hussain was killed by the sword of his grandfather. These are arguments that people have made in history. How? Said, well, Yazid was the caliph of the caliph, and Imam Hussain rose up against the caliph, and whoever rises against the caliph, the Holy Prophet says, is wajib al-qatl, and Imam Hussain was killed by the fatwa of his grandfather. That would be the narrative that we would have if Imam Hussain ﷺ did not take his family and his children with him. He knew very well what would happen to the ladies. He knew what would happen to the children. He wanted Bani Umayyah to do what they could to show the true nature of their cruelty. For then, nobody would then be able to justify the killing of a 6-month-old baby. There would be no reason to justify that. So there was Imam Hussain ﷺ knew very well what he was doing. And that is why when people wanted to stop Imam Hussain from taking their children and their women, he did not listen to them. And he gave many replies. And one of the replies was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see me get killed, and he wants to see these children and these ladies taken as captives. This is the mashiyyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the day of Ashur, we see many such children dying in front of their mothers. In Karbala, there are at least 8 children, 8 fighters whose mothers were present in Karbala. 2 of them were mature and old, young, or had crossed the age of maturity. But 5 of them had not reached the age of maturity. Most prominent among them was Ali Asghar, Janab Qasim, Abdullah ibn Hassan. We don't hear about Abdullah ibn Hassan a lot. Imam Hassan alayhi salatu wasalam had two sons that got martyred in Karbala. One was Qasim. We hear about him a lot. There's another son called Abdullah ibn Hassan. He must be around 11 years old. And the Maqtal does not say much about when he got killed. It very briefly mentions his story. It says that a time came when the women and the children left the camps. They came out of the camps. And it seems that this was the time when Imam Hussain ﷺ had fallen from the horse. Imam Hussain was lying on the plains of Karbala, and the Zuljana had come back to the camps, informing them of the imminent shahadat of Imam Hussain, and the ladies and the children came out of the camps. Probably this was the scene, this was the time where the story starts from. And the ladies were running towards the Maqtal when Imam Hussain realized that the family has left the camps and the children are coming towards me. The Imam, in that state, in whatever state he was, he turned to Zainab, Lady Zainab salamullah alayha, and said, Lady Zainab, please go back to the tents. Go back and enter the tents. Lady Zainab and the other women started to move back to the camp. This was the order of the Imam. But this child, Abdullah ibn Hassan, he continued moving towards the Imam. Overwhelmed with emotions, continued moving towards the Imam. The Imam noticed him. The Imam, even in that state, knows what each and every member of his family is doing. Turned to Zainab alayhi salatu wasalam, saying, take Abdullah with you as well. Lady Zainab quickly rushed towards Abdullah, grabbed him by his hand, and he started to take him back, pull him back towards the camps. And Abdullah ibn Hassan realized that Lady Zainab is more powerful than him, and she would be able to drag him back into the camps. At that point, he said one statement after which the Lady Zainab could not stop him. He said, oh my aunt, I cannot leave my uncle alone in the battlefield. I cannot leave my Imam alone in the battlefield. I will go and help my Imam. Lady Zainab could not stop him. She probably let him go. Abdullah ibn Hassan rushed towards his Imam and he dropped himself on the Imam. He dropped himself on the Imam in the middle of the battlefield. There we have the Imam and his brother's son Abdullah lying on top of the Imam, and they started to have a conversation. The Maqtal does not relate what conversation took place, but it seems that Abdullah would be saying, oh my uncle, I promise you, if you come back to the camps, I promise you no one will say Al-Atash again. You will not hear our cries of Al-Atash. Please come back to the tents. Whoever has gone to the camps did not return. I plead to you, please come back to the tents. This conversation was going that a zalim with the sword trying to kill the Imam, he steps forward. Abdullah ibn Hassan looks at this zalim. He tries to stop him, saying, oh zalim, what are you trying to do? He strikes the Imam. He wants to strike the Imam with his sword, but Abdullah ibn Hassan uses his hands to shield his Imam, and in front of the eyes of Imam Hassan and in front of the eyes of Lady Zainab, this child's hands are chopped off. In front of the Imam, he screams loudly, and what happened after that I wish might not have happened. It is said that this zalim holds this boy by his hair and he beheads him in front of the Imam and Lady Zainab. Lady Zainab कुबरा के दिल पर क्या क्या गुजर गई. एक एक करके जब शहीद वापस आता था, she would mourn the shaheed. But it is strange that when the children of Zainab were brought back to the camps and the ladies were mourning these shuhada, Lady Zainab did not leave the tent. She stayed inside the tent. Why should I mourn over my children when I have the children of Imam Hussain to mourn? When I have Imam Hussain to mourn, why should I mourn over my own children? Allah la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimeen. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this majlis. and to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam so that he can avenge the martyrdom of Karbala, Matam Hussain.
جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب everyone جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب O Anjuman-e-Mohammadi, O progeny of Ja'far, guarding Abu Abdullah, you were the sword of Haydar. O Anjuman-e-Mohammadi, O progeny of Ja'far, guarding Abu Abdullah, you were the sword of Haydar. We honor your shahadat in this Aza Zainab. Labbaik bar zubanam, Janam fidai Zainab, Janam fidai Zainab. Everyone, Janam fidai Zainab. جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب From Karbala to Kufa, Kufa to Sham, Bibi, you brought a revolution with your kalam, Bibi. From Karbala to Kufa, Kufa to Sham, Bibi, you brought a revolution with your kalam, Bibi. Hear the reverberations from that Sadai Zainab. Labbaik bar zubanam, Janam fidai Zainab. جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب جانم فدای زینب Your piety and iman, your sheer determination, your courage and demeanor, truly an inspiration. Your piety and iman, your sheer determination, your courage and demeanor, truly an inspiration. At par with Anbiya is sabr aur ridha Zainab. Labbaik bar zubanam, Janam fidai Zainab. 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 Say no to every tyrant. Say La ilaha illallah. Say no to fear of dying. Remain Remember inna lillah. Say no to every tyrant. Say la ilaha illallah.
Say no to fear of dying.
Remember inna lillah. Calling to truth and justice is still nida-e Zainab. Labbaik bar zubanam, janam fida-e Zainab. 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 Iqra bi-ismi rabbik. Read in the name of Allah. The indigent and hungry. Feed in the name of Allah. Iqra bi-ismi rabbik.
Read in the name of Allah. The indigent and hungry.
Feed in the name of Allah. Knowledge and empathy are what signifies Zainab. Labbaik bar zubanam, janam fida-e Zainab. Everyone. Janam fida-e Zainab. Janam fida-e Zainab. Janam fida-e Zainab. Janam fida-e Zainab. Ya Zainab. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Mu'mineen, please take a seat. We have about 8 minutes for some question and answers. If you wanted to put your Q&As, you can put them on slido.com. Muharram-1444 is the code. Moulana, over to you.
Start with the audience. Is there questions from the audience? We give preference to them. So I will answer one of the questions while there are questions. One of the questions says, it is observed children to pious parents go astray despite Amar bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, even often are rebellious. Where is the loophole? As charity begins at home. Very important question. Despite all our efforts to bring our children, to raise our children as Muslim children, as Mu'min children, it is still possible that they might end up in the hands of shaitan. Where is the loophole? There is no loophole. This is how we have been, how this world has been designed. We all have free will. And at the end, it is their own decision what they choose to become. This is one of the scariest and one of the beautiful things about the design of this dunya, that you can make your child an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer by putting them and forcing them to read and forcing them to go to a university or a medical university, and they will end up becoming a doctor. But you cannot force your children to become a mu'min. You can force them to prostrate by force, but you cannot make their hearts prostrate. That is a decision that they themselves have to take. And that is why you see Prophet Nuh's son had gone astray. So we find stories of where parents did their best, yet the results did not come out, and that is because there is no loophole. That is because at the end of the day, it is their own independent decision based on their free will. Your responsibility, our responsibility as parents, is to give them, provide them the ma'rifah, provide them the circumstances where they know what the law of Allah is. The decision is going to be theirs. Yeah, very important question, and we find that with the Imams as well. The Imams, yeah, the question is, well, there is Nahi anil Munkar, and then there is Hilm and forgiveness, and wal afina anil nas, for example, forgive people, and then there is stop them from evil, right? So where is the balance? What do we do? So there is some judgment involved. The answer would be more complicated than what I will give. Number one, we find this in the lives of the Imams, that if somebody was to hurt them and do something bad against them, was to hurt their sanctity or say bad to them or abuse them, for example, they would forgive them because it was a personal matter. But when it came to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to religion, to a community affair, they would not forgive them. Imam Hussain Islam did not forgive Yazid because it was not a personal matter, it was not a personal dispute. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the law of Allah comes, their wars and their issues were because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not because of them. So number one, when it comes to your own personal matter, you should forgive and you can forgive. However, if your forgiving is going to make them more jari, more aggressive in their aggression, then you should not forgive. So there is a balance. Again, you have to look at what the outcome of your action will be. At times you need to punish, to stop an evil from growing, and at times that will be accomplished by forgiveness, and at times it will be accomplished by being firm and steadfast. Yes.
Where does the need for following the religion comes to play in Amar bil Ma'ruf or Nahi anil Munkar? We have people who are non-believers or atheists. They are more hurt than people who have committed atrocities in the name of Amar bil Ma'ruf.
Can you explain your question a little bit further?
I mean, a person can be atheist and still think he can be a good person. He can propagate goodness in the society. Vis-a-vis a person who is a believer and he commits atrocities in the name of the religion. So where is this need for religion to be followed for Amar bil Ma'ruf?
Okay. Inshallah, tomorrow we will get a bit more into this, but to answer it briefly, Amar bil Maruf has certain layers. There are certain types of Amar bil Maruf that is an obligation on all of us. And there is a certain type of Amar bil Maruf. There are certain Ma'rufs and certain Munkar that is the responsibility of the Islamic State to stop and propagate. So we should not enter into that domain. And that has been identified in the books of fiqh. So the problem happens when me as a devout Muslim, not knowing the rules of Amar bil Maruf, not knowing the consequences of my Amar bil Maruf, because of my ignorance, I take this responsibility in my own hands while I'm not qualified to do that. That is where all the problem starts, when people don't know their boundaries. And it all goes back to ignorance, to jahalat. Before doing Amar bil Maruf, you need to know what the Maruf is, you need to know what the Munkar is, you need to know if it is even wajib on you to do Amar bil Maruf at this point or not. Okay? But most people don't even think about it. It's our duty, and then they take things that is the state responsibility of the state in their own hands. Even that is not allowed. That is the responsibility of the state. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll get more into that, and it will become more clear. Inshallah.
I wanted to ask more about the boundaries of Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar. For example, the government of Iran has instituted a requirement for hijab. Is that responsibility of the government, or is it an individual's responsibility which he or she will deal with Allah?
Things that are of social nature, it is the responsibility of all of us. To what extent differs. The verbal Amar bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar is everyone's responsibility. So, for example, if there was a person who was, so for example, if a person has, let me use the example that you gave. So if a lady is not wearing hijab and she's walking in the street, and every person who walks by, male or female, if they just give one tazakkur, say, sister, please observe hijab, sister, please observe hijab, she will feel restricted. And eventually she might turn to hijab. You're not being offensive, you're not aggressive. It's a request that you're making, and over a period of time when everybody does the same, then that evil will get snubbed and it will get eradicated. So that verbal Amr bil Maruf is everybody's responsibility. But before you do that, you need to know the rules and the regulations. So inshallah, we'll get a little bit into that tomorrow. So we will end here today. Thank you for coming. Matwajah Ziyarat.